So thanks a lot and welcome for coming. I just want to announce that on the Facebook, we posted this announcement about this, not about only this meeting, but about the genre of open symposium. What does it mean? It's basically, my metaphor, it's almost like open mic idea, open microphone. And so anybody can sign up for that, for creation events. And there is a link there. Anna, can you find the link and maybe send that for the chat, please?
Okay.
And basically everyone can sign up for that if you have any idea. And by idea, you can do either like presentation, almost like lecture one, or you might have something that what we will try to do today, which is short presentation if it's needed. Maybe we don't need presentation at all, depending whether or not people read the article or didn't read the article. And in this case, we can just have discussion or just discussion. So if something you want to discuss and you just sign up, and you will see what we developed is a spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet, where everyone with the link can add a line there. And this is why it's a good idea that Anna will send us a link. So you can just, okay, the link is there. So let me click on that and guide you through this real quickly. Okay, it's, oops, for some reason it says that I need to sign up with that. And
okay, let me just check it out. Hold on.
And why is that?
It says I need access.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, just a second.
That's not good. It means that we couldn't use that link if it's required.
No, you will. And I cannot, okay. You have to be kind of part of University of the Students, but how to do that?
No, we need, it looks like we need to deal with that because we need to.
Try this and let's see if it works. And if it doesn't work, I'll change the where this whole thing is and the
To try what?
a different link, because I changed something about this link.
The second, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try. No, access denied. Okay, you know what, can you open yourself? And
yes.
In this case, so that's not good. We need to change that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me, you continue and I'll change this and deal with that.
No, open, I cannot, I want to show.
Oh, you want to share, okay. Okay,
I want
let
you to
me
share.
Yeah, I will share it.
Because at least people will see that and we changed, sorry for that.
It still says for me that I need.
Yeah, I will change how it's working. Okay, but I'm sharing now. Hi, are you there?
We are there, but we cannot see anything. That we will not see you're sharing anything.
No?
No.
Okay,
I can.
You can? I'm sorry.
I could see everything.
Okay,
yeah, we saw it.
Share again.
We could see
share again.
Okay, in this case, yeah, that's my.
Is it better now?
Yeah, this is my, yeah, sorry, we can see it now because it's on my computer, it just was behind the window. So basically, let me just quickly say that, because I hope it's self-evident, but maybe not. So this is the dates of our meetings, our future meetings right here on the left side. Then who is the sponsor or sponsors? Then just topic, what it's about. Then a format about like what you think it could be pure discussion or lecture or whatever you want to do. then the link how to get there, and you can see that sometimes it's with the password, sometimes it's not, and any comments that you want to write there. So that's basically that. And again, I apologize with the link. We can really create this link so it will be available. So right now we have today's presentation, then Anna will present about her visit to Israel and visiting a lot of democratic schools, what she learned about that. And I will present like in July 19 about this paper that I'm working right now. It's Community versus Society, Normative Vision of Sociality in Joint Self-Education. And, you know, all others open, so feel free to add whatever you might come with, any idea that you want to present. So this is the idea of open seminar. Do you have any questions? So as soon as you put there, you don't need to ask anybody's permission and anything like that. You just need to do whatever you want to do. And then we will create events through the Facebook and through the emails that we have, and people will be invited. So that's it.
Okay, I'm stopping share now.
Mm-hmm.
But so the idea is to be every other week.
Yeah.
Or at this time,
Yeah.
at least in the summer, and then we will see in the fall whether that can stay.
Yeah. By the way, maybe one thing that Anna and we might do that put even time here, although time is always questionable because it's time zone and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
no
so
time.
far
No
we're
time.
doing that, and people will be announced through the creating events on Facebook and through the Google Calendar. People will be informed about that. So that's it. Thank you, Anna. Any?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let me just even share the screen and just ask you. So this is actually my article about teachers' pedagogical fiduciary duty to their students. And my first questions, and please feel comfortable to answer to this question. Who didn't read the article? Okay. So, Dina, you didn't read the article, which is fine. In this case, I will provide a brief overview of the article.
Ask who read it or who didn't read it? Sorry.
Who didn't read? Didn't.
Okay.
Who didn't read? Okay, it's just like the reason I'm asking that, not to put on somebody on spot, just because whether or not if all of us read the article, we can skip my kind of short introduction of that. But if you didn't read that, I will do it. Okay, so let me tell you what this article is about and why I wrote that. First of all, let me ask Dina, specifically you, do you know what does it mean fiduciary duty? Okay, so I don't need to discuss because I start my article actually with learning about what does it mean when I was back in Soviet Union. And because I never, in Russian, I don't know whether or not it exists now, the term in Russian, but I never heard something like that. But the more important thing, I never learned even the concept that such thing exists, even in medical kind of area. So in United States, I don't know how it's in Israel, that fiduciary duty usually applied to the financial advisors, lawyers, doctors, even priests in religious kind of communities. There is discussion of the fiduciary duties. And usually there is a big literature about that, and it's a lot of that literature usually in the field of the, from what I look at that, it's in the field of the legal studies and ethics studies. And this is a part of that. But maybe I'm wrong about that, and maybe if you're going in the medical and especially financial area, there is much more probably discussion will be not only in legal and ethical part, but maybe in the managing finances of the client's finances may be much deeper than that. I didn't check for that. As to the education, it exists, but barely, and it exists again in the mostly about legal and ethical studies, like, for example, discussion of sexual relations between teacher and students, for example, or issue of exploitation, like where is, especially when, hi Tara, when kind of apprenticeship, for example, or many other forms of the instruction become exploitative, or unfair grades, or something like that, and so on and so forth. But never it's in education, never it's going in discussion of pedagogy, like relationship. And one of the big reason from what my study showed, that because education does not recognize mostly pedagogical fiduciary relations between teachers and the students. And in my article, so I explored, first of all, why education does not recognize teacher-student fiduciary relations or teacher's fiduciary duty to the students. Why it didn't recognize, and I found at least 3 reasons for that. One, it is probably the biggest reason for that. It's the most straightforward. It's something that I call education paternalism. That's a primary reason. Much more secondary reason. It's but I found that it's very educational institutionalism. The third reason, it's coming, interestingly enough, from self-directed education. It's completely going from opposite side to the educational paternalism. And this is what I found that. So I decided to approach this issue about whether or not it's a good idea, not good idea, the same way how it's usually done in other fields about when they discuss fiduciary duties, through the consideration of problematic cases. And in many cases, by the way, what I found that some problematic cases coming from the court cases in other fields, but some problematic cases coming from practice, that in the practice it's not necessarily a court case, but it's just in practice happen. Or some of them actually, there is a lot of interesting literature when it's imaginary situations considered. In my paper, I decided not to consider imaginary situations, although I consider that absolutely legitimate way to approach that issue of fiduciary duties through the imaginary cases. But I considered 4 cases that are coming from my own practice. And problematic, all of them problematic cases, one way or another. And it's helped me to figure out this notion of fiduciary duty. I don't know again, Tara, did you read the paper?
Yes, I did. I read the paper.
Okay. So since Dina, you know what's fiduciary duty, because it takes me a little bit time to define what's fiduciary duty in general is, and maybe in education in specific, and what's the tension in defining fiduciary duty is. To be brief, the biggest tension in my view is that the fiduciary, the person calls fiduciary, and there is benefactory. This is the language probably coming from legal studies. Sounds like a very jargonistic, but I couldn't find anything else. If you think about that, in this case, fiduciary is educator, and benefactory is a learner, student, educatee. And one of the big controversy of the fiduciary relations is that fiduciary, by definition, has to serve interests of the benefactor. and the benefactor always considered to be the final agency for their actions, except very, very dramatic and very extreme cases. Like, for example, in case of the medical case, when patient is incapacitated and even without conscience, or with disturbed judgment, and so on and so forth. But in other cases, less dramatic and less radical, it is benefactor who is in charge of making decisions. So the biggest tension in this concept is that sometimes benefactor doesn't know what's good for them, and part of the help is actually that for fiduciary is to help to figure out for the benefactor, in this case students, what's their best interest. But what's important is that this kind of situation is still framed under benefactor asking fiduciary for help. So it's not like being, so that's a part of the fiduciary relations. Fiduciary relations always initiated by benefactor. It cannot be initiated by fiduciary. The problem is, again, the tension is that neither sometimes benefactor nor fiduciary knows what's sometimes the best for the for the benefactor, and it might take the whole process to figure it out together for them. Also, the relationship is consensual, and it's any time either of them can kind of break the relationship on at any point, and so-called it can be what sometimes again legal studies it's called no-fault divorce. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if they break the relationship, if somebody is faulty. No, it just might first of all, they can exhaust the usefulness of the relationship. For example, a benefactor student decide that she doesn't need any more educator for help, or it could be for other reasons, like chemistry doesn't work, or like, for example, fiduciary might find that either she doesn't want to help or couldn't help because like there is, for some reason, there is feels that there is no competence or either pedagogical or knowledge-based or what, for whatever reason. So this is talking about this kind of fiduciary relations. And you can see that fiduciary relations doesn't fit conventional education whatsoever, because from day one, there is a violation of fiduciary duty and fiduciary relations. Like, for example, let's take my own practice at the University of Delaware. You know, the classes are scheduled, in many ways, many classes are required to take for the students to take, because otherwise they will be punished one way or another. This is already a violation of fiduciary relations. Then the teacher is assigned. My students, they don't even know me, then don't ask for my help. You know, I become a teacher by the institution, not through my relationship with my students. And that's already a violation of fiduciary relations. Okay, I'm assigned to my students, and also my students depend on me, and they cannot, in many ways, from institutionally wise, and they cannot, like I'm giving them grades. It's required by my institution, and which is already interference in my relationship with my students, and so on and so forth. The question is like why, and the biggest thing it's about this. Educational paternalism that for the first time, as far as kind of we know, because it's not only my thought about that, but historians who study education, they will say that the first person who articulated this notion of educational paternalism without using this term was philosopher Immanuel Kant. And he's basically in his very famous paper about what is enlightenment, and he articulated this idea about educational paternalism. First of all, I want to tell you that the term paternalism, of course, it's a Roman law term. It's a legal term. For people who studied Latin, you can see that it's coming from father. It's a very sexist term. It's basically treating someone as father treats children. And to be very specific, because, you know, there are different fathers, different children, right? You should be very clear what does it mean for Romans, and later in the this term, what it means. From the Roman point, children are property of the father. Like you probably have heard this word proletariat, proletariat. It's and you'll be very much surprised what literally it means. It means the only property of the person is his children. By the way, it's only about male. So the children as only property. That proletariat means, literally means. Again, this is, I don't know Latin. I've learned it from other people. So if you know Latin, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what they told, that proletariat means people, they're so poor that the only possession they have is their own children, but it's a property. So paternalism, this is what paternalism is, but originally meant. Of course, now it means basically limitation of the freedom of someone for their own good. This is what it becomes to be known. Because that part of the Roman law tried to limit actually father's power. And that's why they created this notion as limitation of the power, because the father must concern about well-being of their children. Before it was not. So, and in this case, and the father could interfere with the freedom of the children for their own good. And this is kind of the term as exists. From the beginning, I tell that this term for me is not necessarily negative term, paternalism, and there is situation when people legitimately engage in paternalistic situation. The question is, for me, whether or not it's an education, is it legitimate to be in education? Like, for example, my favorite example, when I was visiting South Africa, and I was on several occasions was saved because at the last moment when I almost get under the car, the problem is that South Africa, like England, they have different traffic pattern than United States or Europe or Israel. I don't know about India. Is it India has British pattern or almost like all others?
No, in Israel it's the same. In Israel it's the same.
Yeah, I know.
It's the same size.
Yeah. I was not sure about Uganda. Also, I don't know about that. But South Africa, it has British pattern, and you know, for the first few weeks, I was very careful. But then, of course, you start relaxing, and this is where the trouble is. So on several occasions, I was stepping on the road from the pavement, and very violently I was pulled back by the stranger. And my initial reaction, like, why is it so much violence? But immediately I realized what it's about. Thanks so much, because, you know, the person definitely either saved my life or saved me from the injury. And, you know, this is not educational moment. This is a rescue moment, safety, survival moment, but nothing to do with education. And I don't need education. I didn't need to be treated as a even subject. I was treated as an object, without any soil, without language, without consciousness. It doesn't matter. All of this doesn't matter. The person treated me as a like a kind of organic piece of meat who is alive yet, and to keep me like that, they push me physically back as a physical object, and I'm very thankful for that. This is type of the extreme paternalism, but very important. And of course, with little children, and not only with little children, in many cases with adults, this type of paternalism may be legitimate. Although, interestingly enough, I found that some philosophers like John Locke, John Stuart Mill, actually argued against that type of paternalism. He still there is a paternalism, but he thought that paternalism should not be if you self-harm, it's not legitimate interference of another person. Harm of other people, then paternalism can be used. So when I'm not trying to harm or going to harm, not trying, but going to harm myself. But if I'm going to harm somebody else, in this case, paternalism is legitimate, but for the self, it's not. At least some philosophers like that thought. In my personal view, I think paternalism is outside of education is very much legitimate. But inside of education, that's why I use term educational paternalism. I think it's illegitimate because it's interfere with education. And sometimes like something else can be prioritized over education. And in this case, paternalism will be fine. Like, for example, Dina, sorry to use your example, if Nick, for some reason, for his own educational exploration, decided to try some poisonous mushroom, you know, it will be kind of, well, if I were his parent, I would be saying it's will be irresponsible if I'm not trying to stop him for his own sake. And in this case, this is not in sake of education. This is for the sake of safety and for the sake of survival. And this is nothing to do with education. Education might follow that, but this isn't, the act itself is not educational. And that's, in my view, very important. So in this paper, I discussed two types of paternalism. This is paternalism, what I call educational paternalism, hard educational paternalism, and soft. Hard paternalism is kind of at traditional schools. We know how to, what students need to study, how they need to study, and we force them to study that. And basically, we just ignore anything what the students' subjectivity is. They will be thankful to us in the future, and that's why we can do it very legitimately. That conventional school.
What about when you choose when you intentionally choose not to interfere, and you mean it as educational?
Is it paternalism or not paternalism? Is it what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and this is why. By the way, this is why this fiduciary study, which I hope will start, pedagogical fiduciary study, will start bringing these interesting cases which to consider. And I don't know, because for me it's difficult to answer to this question because I need to know specifics. But if you develop that specifics, Dina, I really want to encourage you to develop specific case for us to consider.
Like you say, when Neil does something that I know will poison him, so I step in and stop him. But most of the stuff will not be as black and white. It's going to be the gray area. So he's going to walk on the edge of something, and I can choose either to stop him or not to stop him. And in both cases, I can choose it for some reason, which I think is best for him. Like I'm thinking, okay, for him, it's best to fall, to learn on small falls. And so I'm not going to interfere. I'm going to tell him to be careful, but I'm not going to like hold him back. And I decide that I think that it's best for him to have mistakes, to have falls, and I step away. So
let me tell you that when you're not limiting somebody's freedom, that will be not considered paternalism. For whatever reasons. You might not think it's educational, not educational, but it will be not paternalism. Paternalism starts with limiting freedom of other people for their own goods.
So if my choice is to stop him walking on the edge because I think that is a too big a fall and that it's going to be too much for him, and I don't know, he's going to break his head, then I'm paternalistic.
Yeah, but paternalism can be very. It's not that that's easy. Like in this case, I can foresee some difficult cases. For example, what if you bring an interesting toy or book or something. Is it paternalism or not? And I think this is very important to consider particular cases. If you push me, I have something, if you were interested about that, I can give you some very interesting cases when very interesting and problematic. In this case, there is a limitation of the freedom by imposing things on the somebody. Like, okay, if you want me to say about it right now, I interviewed a very interesting educator who moved from progressive education to democratic education. Actually, I published that in another paper, not in this paper, but in another that interview. And that educator brought interesting example of some parents who become kind of almost like hovering over their children. And so, for example, at some conversation after some movie, I think the child was like 8 years old boy, and he just become interested, talked about a little bit about planets. You know, that Mars, Venus, and so on. So next day, mother brought 20 books from the library about planets. And when her son looked at these books, he said, like, I just like ask a few questions, and that's it. I don't need these books. But the mother said, no, you are interested about planets. Let's study more of them. You see, so this is kind of paternalism, because she, in a way, imposing this, which is limiting the freedom of the boy. If he wants to go to walk, I don't know, play with his friends, or read about some other book, or watch movies, play video games, whatever. And now it's almost like obligation to study planets, just because yesterday he asked a few questions or discussed a little bit about planets, and so mothers immediately jump on that and bring the whole thing about this. So this is interesting cases like that, which is, it's not like limiting, not letting do that, but imposing. Paternalism can be done with imposition. So anyway, by the way, Kant actually, in his article, he didn't argue for hard paternalism. Actually, he was very much arguing against that. Part of his article is to argue against hard paternalism for the soft paternalism. And soft paternalism is something that progressive education likes to do. So, for example, Kant was arguing that that students should encourage to reason, and the teacher should accept and not punish the students for impartial or very bad reasoning and bad kind of rationalism and so on and so forth. One commentator on the Kant said the Kant was arguing for freedom of reasoning for the students, but not freedom from reasoning. So this, in this case, that paternalism that was there. And so the Kant created this, in a way, paradox, because Kant very much arguing for the autonomy of the people and self-determination. And this, he defined human dignity, and he thought that the biggest value of it's a dignity, human dignity. And the human dignity is based, according to Kant, on autonomy and self-determination. You will see that contradicts paternalism, especially education paternalism. But he said, the problem is that it's only applied for rational and mature people. And rational people and mature, this is not the same thing. People can be rational but immature, and mature but not rational. What does it mean? Rationality is about reasoning, and particular reasoning, rational, objective, universal reasoning, and Kant defined that pretty well. And maturity is about being able to enact that, having enough will and skill to enact that, but especially will. So there could be people who can be very rational in his point of view, but they have very weak will, very capricious, and that's why they're immature. And they can be mature, very have self-discipline, but irrational. or non-rational, better to say. And so, and he was saying that before you can respect other people's autonomy and self-determination, they need to be mature and rational. And for that, there has to be education, which has to be compulsory. So, which is forced on them, done in their own good. This is what whole educational paternalism argument comes. I'm arguing against educational paternalism from the point of view of separation of the notion of learning and education. For me, learning is, because usually it's the use synonymous, learning and education. In my view, they are not, because certain learning is not educational, and certain education is not based on learning, in my view. And we can go on that, but if you want, we're not. So, what's the relation between learning and education? Learning becomes education only when the person, the learner, recognize and highly appreciate that learning. So it is reflexive. So people has to be aware, first of all, that it's happened to them. And the second thing, that they have to provide evaluation of that. And this evaluation has to be positive. That's why people might, learning can be educational, that stop being educational and then become again educational, because the attitudes of the learner will change. And the problem with the educational paternalism, because it robs from that judgment, from the learner's judgment of what this learning is, it good or bad. Paternalism exactly say, well, they would learn, it doesn't matter what the judgment is, later there will be judgment, later it will be judgment. So the education will happen later. So in a way, there is no education in a way. It's a forcing learning, but no education. At least not normative education, because the right for education, the freedom of education is withtaken by the educational paternalism, either soft or hard, it doesn't matter, soft or hard. And that's why this kind of the act of paternalism, which is maybe outside of education, can be legitimate, but within education, as a basis for education, is illegitimate, because exactly it robs the most important part, the learner evaluation, what's good in the learning or what's not good. And another part of this, of course, there is a lot of education based on not on learning, but on other things. So now it's about
Eugene, can I ask a question?
Please. By the way, Raz, let me say that it's okay to interrupt me at any point, and we can start discussion, and that's it. Go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking, you know, but if I understand you right, so education occurs when the learner appreciates and choose what and where and why to learn. Any other way, it's paternalism, probably. But what if the learner was initiated or was in some behavioristic way conditioned to appreciate some things and not appreciate other things? Is not by himself, if I can use this term, not authentically, if you wish, choose to appreciate something. He was, you know, in a Skinner's way or in some other way conditioned to appreciate things. So if in a bit Kantian's manner, but not completely, because I believe that somebody has the right to choose whether to act rationally or not. He doesn't have to do so in order to be free. But if he doesn't have the choice, if he's only conditioned to like some things and not to like other things, how can you call it freedom?
Tara, do you want to add something?
Yeah, no, that's exactly, you know, that's one point. And there was another point on paternalism that I wanted to ask, which Diane was talking about. The child who, she said that it's her decision, that she thinks that it's good for the child to fall and then, learn from that. But here we only know the intention of the teacher or whoever it is, or the this thing, what you call fiduciary, and not of the beneficiary. And so you don't know about, whether that's curtailed the freedom of that beneficiary or not, of the child or the boy or whoever it may be, or the girl, whoever it may be. So that's one question that I have. And the other one is the one that's raised right now about this question of intention. I mean, your appreciation, the root of that appreciation, where does it originate? Is it really the person's free choice, volitional kind of freedom, or is it something that has been kind of conditioned by the cultural context and in which we are there, and we believe, we believe in it. I mean, we think that this is what it is, and it really appreciate. We think so. So, but in a way, it's conditioned.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what.
This is a very good question, and this is again, in my view, a root of this very important question, because again, it's very deeply connected to the paternalism. Because as soon as you that question in a way says, wait a minute, what if the person illusionary about their about values? Appreciation is based on evaluation. So finding the value. Appreciation is kind of a positive value, but it could be negative value as well, or neutral value. So the question is, what if the student wrong? Well, this is kind of, again, we're talking about my approach, and not in this paper. It's another paper that I developing that. In this case, I'm part of the paternalism. It leads to something that is called kind of bird-eye view. Because somebody looks above and immediately say, this is good value, this is bad value. And you say, how do you know that it's good or bad? Ras, I would ask you, and say, well, it's Kant will tell you, Kant will answer to you, because it's universally, it's objectively good, and it's universally and objectively bad. This is his answer. Since I'm rejecting his. Let me just finish.
Yeah.
Because just keep this kind of things. I will refuse. I want to remain, and this is I'm guided by Bakhtin in this case. Remain at the level of the personal subjectivity. I'm not above. I can be with this person, but I'm not above. For example, I might ask this person who I think is behaviorally conditioned to appreciate that, and so on and so forth. And I'm telling that person, your appreciation is behaviorally conditioned. And the person, I say, it's Eugene, it's not of your business. It's my life. Get lost. And that will be a legitimate answer to me. Whether or not I agree with that or disagree, it's another story. But living nothing can, unless the person wants to engage with me in dialogue about that, or ask for help, but not even ask for help, but become interested or say, why do you think so? We can start dialogue about that. But if the person say, it's none of his business, okay, that's my observation, and that's it.
Eugene, sorry, I push.
No, it's very good question.
Point. I first of all, I believe that some kind of values guide us all. Also, this belief in freedom of education, it's also a kind of ideology, if you wish to put it this way. We believe, you believe that this is the right way to educate. So you might say this is also a kind of paternalism, but this is not the point which I wanted to raise. What I I do go with you on this. I do go with you on this. I do believe that freedom is very, very important. But I imagine, for example, a case in which a child likes very much to play on some, let's say on piano, yes? And being a small child, his parents, each time he would approach the piano, would, I don't know, which would punish him, okay? So little by little, he learned not to go to the piano because otherwise it would be punished, okay? So when he came to the university or whatever, like this girl you said in the article about the computer, or she likes computer, so this boy who grew up to be a person is when he comes to the university and he wishes to learn something, he tells you, yeah, I want to learn X, I want to learn Y, but he will never tell you, I want to play the piano, because he was conditioned not to do it. So he wasn't free. He wasn't acting by freedom. He was act by a way he was conditioned to do it. So how can you help him to what?
No, you can. My answer is
actualize
himself from
his
that.
potential.
Yeah.
Is it paternalism if I want to do it? Is it paternalism?
Yes, it is. And part of this, and we will go to Dina to you in a moment. Part of this, my approach to education is the educatee. I'm not saying learner, educatee, because it's about education, not about learning. Has a right and recognized right to define what education is. Not you, because you think that playing piano is important. Who cares that it's important for you? It's important for you, play piano. I don't think it's important for learn how or to play piano. It's my decision about that. Life is finite. It's not infinite. By studying piano, it means that I'm not studying something else in my life. You can say, oh, it's because of my previous trauma. Maybe. Like, for example, I'm learning, I was learning Russian when I was born, not Chinese. Why? Because I was born in the family that speaks Russian. There is zero freedom for me to choose that, to speak Chinese, because I was surrounded people. And that's why it's nothing to do with education, by the way. It was a lot of learning happened, but not much in that sense education, because I was not choosing a language, and I didn't even know that languages exist when I was a little one. I was just thinking that there is no such thing as Russian language. It's just like language, just we speak. There is no language, and which was fine. In this case, when we talk about freedom, it's a freedom to define my own education.
Okay.
Constantly.
Okay.
What's education is for me.
But if you are if you are brainwashed, if you are brainwashed, if somebody takes you and brainwash you or
it's like
hypnotize you and
exactly you're free to your opinion about me in this case.
Yeah. Eugene, I was just going to
just a Tara. Let's Dina say, and then Tara, you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say that you can look at it more broadly. I think in this case of the piano student, the non-player, that why he wanted to play so much when he was little. What did he actually want to kind of be creative, or did he want to just do something that he saw, or like the core values that informed his wish to play the piano will stay with him even if he will be conditioned not to specifically play the piano. So he will use those same core values and desires and competencies, and he will move to a different direction, but he will still be doing the same thing. Or he will be unhappy because he won't find that kind of area where he will be using That's how I see it. So it's like, it doesn't matter if he'll be conditioned not to play the piano, he'll find another way to do what he wanted to do.
You believe he'll find another way?
Well,
I think
yeah,
this
if
is
he
a
will
yeah.
be looking. Huh?
Can I say something? I think that we're constantly jumping between two levels. One is the level of what is being learned, and another one is this reflexive level, what's good for me. And for the learner, at any point of time, what's good for me as a reflexive level, that's where the fiduciary duty comes to help the person make a good decision that they consider good themselves at that reflexive level, not necessarily they lost an occasion to learn this or that, because they may have been not free, and we are never completely free, not only as babies, but in so many circumstances define what we can or cannot do economically, politically, religiously, or whatever, that we don't have any control. But in education, I think this is that there are these two levels. One is the level of what we are learning, an active process of learning, and the other one is a reflection of that. And I think on the reflection, I would agree with Eugene if he says, if you say summary, I witness how much you love to learn piano, but your parents didn't let you do, and now you think you don't like piano, but I'm telling you, you might like piano. And the person has the real right to say, well, it's none of your business. That for me doesn't exist. For me exists like I at this moment want to go someplace, and that's not piano at this point.
Yeah, but Anna, the piano, it's only an example. The point
Yeah, of
is
course.
that people, of course, like Eugene said, which is true, I think, that we all conditioned in some way or another. No doubt about it. But still, if you are not aware of you being conditioned, if you only think in a way or act in a way according to which you were conditioned, and there can be many. The piano is only a way, you know. Like in Israel, people, I don't know, let's say they believe in strong leaders, okay? They believe in strong leaders, but they're being, I don't want to say brainwash, yeah? But for many, many years, there has been a propaganda which promotes the importance of strong leaders, okay? So this is a propaganda. Now, when you are a child, you do not know this is a propaganda. And when you go out, it's already implanted in you, okay? So you say, if I understand you, Eugene, you say, it's okay, it's okay. You don't want to enforce your values on somebody else. It is okay if he believed in something because in some way or another he was brainwashed. It's okay. But the superior ideal is to let somebody to decide by himself where and what to do.
All right, let me reply, and then Tara, please, because after that. But let's quickly reply. One of the problems of Enlightenment and Kant, he thought that all societal problems can be, he said there is two things to solve all societal problems. One for politics, another for education. And I completely disagree with that. This is what abuse of education, what's happened. Like you saying, brainwash and stuff like that. This is a problem that nothing to do with education. It's a political problem that has to be solved, but not through the education. And this is a very wrong idea. This is exploitation of education, instrumentality of education. Then people say, okay, education will solve all the problem. That's why we will force this education on people for their own good, so to make them rational, and they will notice things. And this is, I think, it's a big not only mistake, it's a tragic mistake.
Yeah, I like that point.
Yeah, but I just want to say that it might be you know, I think that each education attitude, it's based on some belief of ours in some kind of human nature. My belief is that people, it's a bit maybe Aristotelic. It's Aristotelian. Like, I believe that each person have some kind of a potential, and if this potential is not being having the chance to grow up, so education is not doing what we should do. I mean, education should help people in a way to manifest and grow their potential. Otherwise, people cannot become what they can become according to their own potential. So I think this is part of my concept of education. Is it a paternalism? I don't know. I wish them to be the what they could be. I don't want to tell them what to be. I don't want to tell them. I just want to help them to be what they want to be.
Ras, where I see paternalism. Paternalism starts with defining what's education for other people. Because this is part of this, in my view, education. It's a judgment what's education is. As soon as I say education for me, like critical examination, blah, 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 it's fine. But as soon as say it's a definition for Dina and her child, and for Mark and for us and whatever, that's my paternalism starts. Because I'm robbing you for making your own decision what education is and changing that mind. For example, in one case, education can be training. In another, it's socialization and practice, because I just want to play guitar. I don't care about critical things about that, about how guitar play, why is the guitar played this way, and so on and so forth. But so that's part of paternalism. Defining what education is part of paternalism. When you're not doing for yourself it's fine, but for other people it's not. Tara, now you. Sorry, you're waiting. We're waiting for
I hope I haven't lost my point, but let me start where I want. I like this idea, the distinction that you make between learning and education, because especially that education, when I say self-education in the sense that you mean, learning happens, as you said, like, you're in a family which speaks Russian and you pick up Russian. There you don't have a choice. In the sense, it's what your environment gives you, you just pick it up. Whereas education is when you start individuating and you start making your choice. When there is a choice and you exert your choice, and then you want to be that, and that also includes your potential, and that you want to be your unique self, you're flowering forth to be your unique self. So that way, it's at that point, I think, that this idea of fiduciary kind of a relationship takes on significance. In the sense that when do you become really paternalistic, or when do you really allow the student the choice to be what the student wants to be, not from your point of view, but from the point of view of the student. And therefore, the student's appreciation, volition, everything comes into play. And is this the way, I mean, you've been interpreting also? Is it more or less like that?
Yeah. And one thing that I want to bring another part specifically may be interesting for you, because for some strange reason, Western, what I call Western and civilization, which is spread through the whole thing, lost in other part of education, because the focus become on learning. But by the way, it's extremely interesting to figure out like why it's lost. And it used to be there. It's part of non-learning education, which is in all cultures, including West European part. It's existed in past, but it's completely lost by now. Which is because in many ways it can be called revelation, satori, intuition, insight, and many other things, which is not based on learning, It's a different type of the education. And again, it's a reorganization of experiences. By the way, it's involved in the drugs, the psychedelic things as well. And it's completely lost. And there is whole culture in like of that. And it exists in like, I think in India, like Buddhism, and not only Hinduism, many religious traditions focused on that part. But there is non-religious approaches to that as well. It's not necessary, it's not part of religion only. But whole tradition of this, it's unfortunately lost in this kind of learnification. If you think about that, when education was reduced to learning, completely to learning. And it's lost another kind of lag of its, which is non-learning lag. What's done for the completely different type of approaches. And there are, it's many of them. It's not just one. Such a huge, it's a rich area. Just by the way, and again, I don't know if Tara, if you're interested in that or not, but I think it's worth considering that.
Yeah, no, but I still, I'm quite this thing, I mean, empathetic about the point that Raz is making about this kind of conditioning and that ideological kind of a thing that you grow up, and somewhere it, suppresses your real self. I'm just taking, I mean, like he gave the example of the piano playing, and the child might have been very good at it and might, even develop a very good, this thing, what a liking for it, and then want to do it and excel in it. But then, this kind of a constraint, the constraint that comes around of experience and the way that he's of his experience with it, somehow puts a barrier to that, to the realization of that potential. I don't know, how do we kind of extricate? And you say that's politics and not education. But then I also feel that, as you go along and the more you invest into your own learning, what happens is many of these things that have happened, I mean, you reflect back on your own childhood and the experiences, and then you start relooking. I mean, there are many things that I have relooked in my past. Nobody told me about it, or nobody said you should do this consciously. But through other realization, through other conversations, through other dialogue, it's just kind of spilled over to other areas of my life and my experience, and I have started relooking at it. So that's a possibility also. So it's not as if, you can't compartmentalize it. Somewhere this realization will get unveiled. I feel that, whatever has happened through ideological kind of a constraint might kind of, you get liberated from that, I feel. There's a possibility of that happening when you are, doing things by choice. Later on, maybe it might happen later on. That's a possibility, I think.
Or not, nothing is guaranteed. And I think important things to, when you said, Tara, when you say I, when you say you or they, that become a problem. And this is okay. Anna?
Mark had something before me. Mark.
Okay, Mark. Okay.
Oh yeah, thanks, Anna. I was just like kind of stuck on this word potential because I find myself sort of thinking back to some research I did recently where I kind of felt like there was this hegemony associated with developmentalism and this idea that that someone is that a student is always in the progress of becoming rather than just being. And as a result, what they're doing is just simply reflection of their developmental state. And in the context of paternalism, it's an interesting thing to think about because I never really thought about, it is the ultimate paternalism, in some ways, the developmental ideology. because it's very authoritative and it has a lot of power. And so people will give up their freedom with the belief that somehow they're becoming something that they're on their way to become something that, you know, they believe will be better than what they are now. And in many ways, you know, that they're constantly reaching for something and being told to reach, you know, like I mean, see these posters in schools constantly with, you know, these ideas of, you know, that feed on this ideology and keep people from just simply like focusing on the moment and I was kind of excited about this revelatory type learning as well. That's completely lost if one's focused so much on the progress one's making towards some imagined potential. So anyway, I just thought, just a thought that came in my head.
Okay. Okay, and I had a question about about what does it mean full potential, because nobody knows that, first of all, and it can change from time to time. And what looked like a full potential at one point may be abandoned by the student, or not even a student, a person, and another point for so many complex different reasons, and nobody can realize all their potentials because it's just impossible in one life. So and that's one thing, but another thing is talking about on that reflective level, helping a person make a better decision, let's say, about what they how they evaluate. Is it then okay, or is it paternalism to just lay out all different possibilities of not tell somebody, you know, you're missing something if you're doing this or not doing that, or you should be doing, but just saying like there are all these possibilities for you, and which one and why do you evaluate them like that? Like kind of like in that sense, it's similar to creating a rich learning environment, not for learning, but rich reflective environment in a sense. Is that paternalism?
Yeah, it's a I just think I just want to say to Mark and to Eugene, I don't think I was completely understood. Probably I didn't explain myself enough. I don't think that the question is whether if there is any potential or not. What I mean is more like what Anna said, is that if you want, there is, Eugene, there is, I'll ask you the question. I mean, there is some belief behind your way of seeing the right education. You believe in something. It's not just you say, yes, this is the right way. No, you believe in something. What do you believe in? I'm not sure. Do you believe in the freedom of a person? Do you believe of not imposing on any person? Do you believe in the respect of another person's? I don't know, but there is, obviously, it must be that there is some belief in some kind of human nature and human relationship behind your way of treating education. It's not just coming from nothing. It's coming from somewhere. So I don't think that our views it's so different, because I think that in a way I agree with you. I think people should be able to choose for themselves what is right for them. I just think, and this is, I go to Anna's question, I just think that people cannot in any condition decide the best for them. I'm not saying what is the best for them. I'm not saying it's the best for you to play the piano. No, I'm saying that if people do not have the tools, they cannot rightly or potentially answer these questions. They answer them not in a way that they could have answered them if they knew more, if they knew other things. This is what I'm saying, and I'm not so sure it's that our basic values are so different.
Let me reply to rest to you. First of all, I think it's not in my view, in general. And I'm talking about like this is for you, might work, but I think in general, it's not the business of education to make decision about what's best for the person. Education is not about that. Education is not like what's best for me. I mean, it's maybe for some people it's become important, that's fine. But for some other people, that's not what they're interested in. It's like, for example, they become interested about butterflies. It's nothing to do about what's good for them. They're just passionate about butterflies and they want to dedicate a lot of time and energy about that. And if other people support them, that's even better. Let me give this interesting real story. By my education, my PhD in psychology, that's why which means that everybody around me constantly asks me for advice about different things, on which I have zero expertise, and I try to explain them that I cannot do it. Plus, I'm in education, so it means me educational expert. So this is a friend of my wife, a colleague of my wife in California, and she had her son who was, I think, early teens, who was spending with his friends all the time playing video games, which extremely bothered her mother and father. But I don't know the father. I've heard mostly about mother because of my wife's connection. So these three friends were spending, don't do homework, don't do this, don't do that, completely in this playing video games, discussing video games, and so on and so forth. So the mother was, by the way, her definition was of the whole thing, Ras, very close to what you're talking about. She thought that there is addiction of this. So they're addicted. So they did many things. There was many scandals. They went through many, including using drugs, some drugs. And they managed, in case of this, her son, they managed kind of successfully stop this obsession with video games. So he started studying, went to the college and there. Which happened with another, his friend is more or less the same through the many scandals. With another family, which they consider to be very permissive, they didn't do that. So what's happened is that their son didn't go to college. Okay? But he became designers of the games, became multimillionaire, and considered to be a huge success. Now, all the life, even up to now, in the family that I know has very bad relations with their parents, feel that they broken, the life is broken, and he constantly feel the son. He's right now in late 30s. Feel that it's the family actually completely broke his life, and all this resentment continued. So. That's back to the question about potential, about this, about that. You know, it's a value judgments that other people did. Games is bad, studying homework is good. That's a value judgment.
But you yourself, you said he managed to grow up according to his potential. This is exactly to you. But even though we didn't have the conditions, so you also believe in it. So this is what I'm saying.
I don't believe in that any potentials. That's not my language. I'm just saying that this is what's happened. No, you can use that. I'm just saying you using the language of potential. I'm not. Okay. I don't know what does it mean potential. There is a life. I'm more close to the mark. I'm focusing on the being rather than becoming. I think it's much more respectful to treat people how they are, and rather than to see someone in them who is not there, but maybe there.
Why do you believe? This is my question. Why? Why do you believe in it? Why do you believe in the freedom of education? What is the reason?
You know what? Let me tell you why. And by the way, maybe I don't know why, but this is my answer. How I think it's wise. It took me a while to start thinking, like to realize first of all. Then when there is a lot of conversation, and which I use accustomed to about education, it's come from something that can be called instrumental education. It's education for something, education for potential, education for critical thinking, education for getting a good job, education to become a good citizen, education to become democratic, or and so on and so forth, a good husband, good wife, education to become a good friend, a good person, and so on and so forth. Education for. And it took me a while to realize, and I'm not saying this education is necessarily like that is bad, but it's almost like, let me tell you how I came to this, when this aha moment happened. I don't know how it's in Israel, but in United States, when there is bad economy, and I feel it's right now going in bad economy, but maybe not. In how it affects public schooling, the first thing to go is art. So they cut spending on art curriculum, and they cut art classes, art teachers, and so on and so forth to save money. And I asked my students who want to be art teachers, can you develop your arguments for why art education is important and should be supported? And I started hearing my students saying, in my view, bizarre thing, my American students, they're saying, I asked them to prepare a speech, like convinced people that art education is important. And they start saying, well, art education is important because art increases math test scores. And something like that. It's really, and I asked a very simple question. Raise your hand in the class. First of all, raise your hand if you like to listen music, sing songs, dance, watch movies, read books, and almost everybody raised their hand. And ask them, how many of you are doing that because you want to increase your math test scores? Of course, zero. And I suddenly realized, wait a minute, we have the similar situation in education. We're focusing on the productive things, but education has its own internal value. So this is my investigation. This is where I came from. When investigations are called intrinsic education.
I think I understand now the difference between our views. I think, if I may put it this way, I think you are optimistic. You believe that the way people drive themselves, leave the potential premise aside. It doesn't matter. You believe that people can drive themselves the best way, and any way somebody from the outside try to guide them will be paternalism. I believe that without some guidance, people will be paternalized whether they want it or not. So this is where I think we are divided. So I believe that people are all the time being manipulated in the society we live, and without awareness, just a bit like Freire, without understanding of this manipulation, people cannot act as they could or they want be. You say it's better for them to choose to do without manipulating of the educators, but I claim they're being manipulated anytime, anywhere, all the time. So this is where I think we are divided.
Can I reply? Because I think mirroring other person is very important when we're trying to mirror. Let me tell how I see you. That's very good. But it's very good to also ask whether or not I think it's good mirroring or not. Picture is good or not. So I think that it's somewhat good, but not completely good. Like, for example, I'm not saying that, I'm not arguing against guidance. I think guidance is very important. But only, in my view, the guidance should start with somebody asking me to be guided, then it's terrific. There is nothing wrong about that, and so on and so forth. Now, you think that education will solve the problem of manipulation of other people. I think it's that's what I think very. I would not say naive. It's just wrong. Education does not solve the problem of manipulation. Like education will not solve many other problems. Education exists not to solve problems. That's the problem with bigger problem of education, to think that education is a problem solver. It's not. It's not about what's best for the person or not what's best for the person. The same like art. In this case, education is very similar to many ways to art. In this case, art doesn't solve problems. Many people, by the way, think that it is. And like Freire or people like Marxist people, education, art should serve to solve problems. I think it's misuse and abuse of art. It doesn't mean that education and art sometimes solve problems. It's true. Sometimes it does. But it's only sometimes. And it's not primary kind of goal of art. It's not to solve societal problems or any problem. And that's my view. The same thing about education. Its primary purpose is not to solve any problem. It's a part of existential need of the people. And by the way, you said if you think it's I did the research actually to check that, and I found that it's almost universal. All people, young in different cultures. I used 3 cultures: Russia, Brazil, and United States. I found that people has earning for that type of education. And all, young, old, with high degree of education, lower degree of education, they all earning for that. As well as this instrumental education exists as well, which is fine as well. Nothing wrong about that. But I think this idea that education will solve, this is Enlightenment project, that education will solve all problems, including problems of manipulation, are wrong. Sometimes it might, but mostly it will not. It's not a problem of education. It's a problem of society. And by the way, this paternalism is manipulation. So you're trying to solve problem of manipulation through the manipulation. And I think it's a very wrong approach. Even if you completely focused on dedicate your things, how to deal with manipulation of people's manipulation. That's a very important problem. And I think it's nothing to do with, in my view, or very little to do with education. But it's super important problem, especially now. Anna, you want to say something?
No, I'm just thinking. Sorry about that.
Okay. Because I feel your hands is almost
yeah. Well, I was kind of like.
Dina, you want to say something? Because I'm reading nonverbal communication. You changed the mic. Oops, you look like you're frozen.
Frozen, yes.
So,
yeah, I want. Sorry, I'm talking too much. I always feel Anna knows that I feel all the time. All the time I have this question.
No. I think your questions are terrific. By the way, sorry. Very good questions and very provocative.
I also apologize. Because my daughter in 15 minutes I have to take her. I'm alone here with my 2 daughters. My spouse, she's not here, so I wanted to ask you. This is has to do with your what we are talking now, but it's about your article because you compare between. I think it's kind of analogy. I'm not sure. You can correct me if I'm wrong. About the fiduciary of the doctors and lawyers, right? And so I thought to myself, in order to be a doctor, a medical doctor, you can't tell somebody, okay, go and learn what you want, where you want, why you want, in your way. No, because if you tell somebody to do this, he won't be a good doctor. I wouldn't want to be treated by a doctor or a lawyer, for that matter, that just being taught himself whatever he wanted to be, whatever he thought is right to be. He doesn't know, for example, anatomy, just for example. And then you spoke about the teacher education. So does a teacher, and now the analogy is breaking, because isn't it true at the same things for a teacher that he should know certain things. For example, about cognitive development of children, or psychology of people, or stuff like this. You see, if the teacher, which I teach in a teacher education institute, can I tell my students, okay, go and teach whatever, go and taught yourself whatever you want, because don't in this way I harm the vocation and the professional knowledge they should have in order to be good teachers?
Thanks. This is a good question. And by the way, it's also true for doctors as well, by the way. If somebody wants to be a doctor or teacher or whoever, in a way, what does it mean? Especially with right now, the situation is in education extremely distorted because of paternalism. And that's, by the way, why, let me tell you, I came to the University of Delaware and I started teaching classes that taught by previous professors. In part, some of them left and some of them retiring. And let me focus on the retirement kind of. One professor retiring, Mark probably knows him because he also went to the University of Delaware. So the course was about teaching, it was called, what it was called? Instructional strategies, the course was called. Now it doesn't exist anymore.
What was the name of the course?
Instructional strategies.
Ah, okay.
So and you know, it makes sense to look at the syllabus of person who taught that before. So I look at the syllabus and I couldn't believe my own eyes. The course was about rats. So the person was teaching about all this behavioristic stuff about rats, not about even people. Rats. And I kind of came to this person and asked, like, how come you're teaching future teachers? It's mostly about rats. Behavior in the mazes and different schedules and all these Skinners, not only Skinners, but many other things. And he told me, why not? Learning is learning. It doesn't matter with the rats or with the children, with this, it's learning. So this is fundamental learning. This is what they need to know. You know what, this kind of things, I will start thinking, it looks like we can teach, and he was teaching for like 30 or 40 years before me. And I realized that I want to teach about cognition or this or that. But you know what I start thinking? We can teach whatever nonsense we want. I can see in his case it's nonsense. Of course, I will say that I'm teaching not nonsense. I'm teaching right things. And he's teaching. But I start thinking, like, how do I know that it's right? How do I know that when I will be retiring, the person will come and say, oh my God, he's teaching such a bullshit. The problem is that there is no, in a way, feedback loop. And this is a problem of education. There is no feedback loop. That's one thing. And another one, that of course our students are not they're not actors, they're not active in deciding their own education, of course. And all of the, by the way, it's connected problem. Like, for example, if my students don't like what I teach, I become very upset with them, and I will try to make them to learn what I'm teaching. Let's compare that with situation in the movie industry. If somebody makes a movie that nobody wants to watch, there is two possibilities. One possibility is several possibilities to improve the movies. So people will watch. Another possibility to find your own audience. Maybe it is a movie, it's a great movie, but for small audience. But if there is no audience at all, at least now, it is now considered to be a bad movie. Nobody will try to make audience stay in the theaters and force them to come just because the movie is made. But in education, unfortunately, it's exactly that situation. We will try to make people to stay there and force them to stay in the cinema theater and to look at the and not to talk with each other because it will be distraction and so on and so forth. That's why it's education as a practice, institutionalized practice. It's extremely dysfunctional, even from their own definitions, by the way. I'm not talking about what we just discussed before. I'm talking about how it's dysfunctional.
Mm.
And the question is, why is it dysfunctional? Why there is no feedback loops and so on and so forth? And I think this is what my encouragement. Now, if you get the kind of completely, the situation when I'm calling for existed before, especially in the higher education. Do you know that in medieval time, in South Europe, when a university, and they call universities, emerged, like for example, Bologna. It's so funny that they call Bologna system for the system that completely antithetical history of Bologna University, especially in the south of Europe. And there is a reason for that, political and so on and so forth. Until Napoleon destroyed that system completely, it was students who defined university, not professors. What to study was defined by the students, not by the professor. So the students hired professor, and they were very, very tough about what and how the professor is supposed to teach. By the way, to the point that they were abusive, in my view. That's my judgment. For example, one part of the contract, they defined how long the honeymoon of professor's honeymoon should be, because they have a system of the fines. If professor violates something, they fine the professor. By the way, the professor first has to put his own money before that, because in order to fines to start. Later, they will pay him and kind of returning that. But initially, he has to put his own money, because he will be fined from the day one. So in this case, there is guarantee that he will pay students for that. By the way, the rector of the university, the chief of the university was a student, not the professor. And so that system existed. And let's say students make a bad choices of studying something that's not very important. Well, they will suffer later on. Well, when they go to the practice. So there was constant feedback loop. And by the way, that students informed the kind of older, you can call them older, but more advanced, the ones who already graduated and went to the practice, they informed the upcoming students how much things useful or not. And of course, many of these professors were kind of professor practitioners who were practiced that as well. So they can tell them if they want to hear. But if they don't want to hear, that's fine as well. You will learn it later if you don't want to hear about that. By the way, on another hand, sometimes the students were right, because something is changing, and they actually were much more ahead of the practice. And they were part of the changing the practice itself. Like, for example, let me give modern examples. When the practice is rapidly changing, like computer science, many students are much more advanced than their professors. And they can start changing this education, their education and the students' education around them in the much rapid sense than the professor they don't have. But even forget about that. At least it creates this feedback loop, which is right now is absolutely missing.
I think
these kind of credential institutions exist almost in itself for what, and it's very important to understand what's the reason is, and they not necessarily the reason rooted in the mastery of the practice. They exist for other reasons, which nothing to do with that. But that's another story. Go ahead, Anna.
I wanted to answer to Raz about the doctor and the whether you'd like to take to have a doctor who decided what to learn by themselves or not. I think the practice itself can create standards and needs and let people practice it as practice if they think they want to hire somebody or not, and also the word of mouth. This is a good doctor, not good doctor. But that's all in practice, not in education. The education is there to help these people who want to become a doctor in any way they want to be. That's the education part. But the practice itself they can have, like for the lawyers, they can have bar exams, or for the medical profession, they can have exams. They can decide, okay, this is we will let Raz be a doctor because he knows really how to do this and this, but we will not let him be a doctor for the feet because he has no idea for the feet. He can only do the ears, let's say, or something like that. But that's all in practice, and that's all absolutely legitimate. But if you're a teacher of Raz, then you can say, how can I help you, Raz? What do you want to do? Why, what's your questions that I can answer or want? I'm not judging whether is good for you or not good for you. That's not the question of education.
Yes.
That's a question of practice.
So it's different between being a teacher and being like a lawyer or being like a medical doctor. There is a difference.
Yeah.
Exactly. Can I just jump in? Because that's another thing that I wanted to ask. Is there a difference in the definition of what is fiduciary duty when it is used in the case of lawyers and doctors, for example, and then when it's used in the case of teachers, for example?
Well, one big difference that school teaching, we're talking about that, is extremely distorted practice. Unlike doctoring, I mean, I'm not saying like medicine, like many other practices, has its own problems. But I think this is the problem is that if you listen constantly, professor of education like Raz, you and me, and again, in case of you, I don't know, but in terms of my colleagues at the University of Delaware, but beyond on that, one of the big things is their critique of the practice, existing practice. You will not find, in my view, maybe I'm wrong, any other practice but education when people who teaching that practice so much criticize the practice itself.
It's true, yeah.
And in my view, this is one of the interesting and important issue, like how this whole thing is different and why. And nevertheless, by the way, one important thing, we in a way, we criticize that practice and continue that practice at the level of the university itself. We say one thing and doing another thing. Let me give one example. I was, again, Mark, maybe you can get this idea who it might be, or maybe not. I was passing at the in the University of Delaware in the School of Education. It's almost like this maze. You know, Skinner would love our building because it's maze there. So it's a huge corridors and there are auditorium classes. So I was passing by and one of my colleagues was saying something like that. There will be exam, and an exam will be 5 principles of constructivism, and you need to memorize them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what? 5 principles of constructivism that you need to memorize because they will be on the exam. You see, if you think, well, whatever you think about constructivism, but constructivism is not about memorizing 5 principles of anything. It's the last thing. And also constructivism probably will not agree with this type of exams.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So it's completely the form and the content does not, and it's fine. You know, it's fine. Nobody, by the way, I told this kind of anecdote to my other colleagues, of course, not this one, but they didn't say, and what's the problem? And I think that's the problem of, it's much more problem in practice of education than in medical. In medical, yes, there may be some disagreements and some changes and some dissatisfaction with medical practice, but not at that degree.
Why do you think it's like this, Eugene? Why do you think?
But in short, there are several things. One, paternalism, that doing that, because in paternalism you have this, sorry to say, arrogance to think that you know what's good for other people without any kind of thing. That's one thing. Another thing, credentialism. That the whole education is about credentialism. That's why there is a gap between practice, mastery, and credentialism. That's why the whole thing is not about practice. It's serving some other purposes in a society, this credentialism. And we can go there. I can elaborate on that.
You said that besides paternalism, there were other things, institutionalization. And so I think that that's also a big reason, because institutions create their own kind of trend of practices that it's very hard to change, again, for many different reasons. That could be really a whole number of reasons. And even if you want to change as an individual professor and not be paternalistic, you're almost forced back into that, because at least I was told in Chestnut Hill College when I worked, like, well, you're the expert. What's your problem of telling the students what's right and wrong? You know.
The institutionalism, this is, Dina, for you, so you didn't read the article. Its argument is like that, which is very interesting. It's rooted in post-paternalism, but it's not only. It's kind of, there was a person who writes a whole paper with the title, Why Professor-Student Relationship is Not Fiduciary. And the main gist of this argument is that, students do not pay directly to the professors. Professors paid by the institution. That's why the professor has to serve the institution, and not, which is in my own kind of bogus argument, because in my view, because it's just stating status quo without explaining, is it good? Is it distortion in itself? Or is it how it's supposed to be? In my view, it's exactly distortion.
Plus, it's not true that the students are not paying. They are at the very end.
But it's the institution. Still institution. But you know what? It's interesting if you apply this to the doctors, the same argument, that will be huge. By the way, that's a problem. Some people try to do that. In the United States, many doctors are paid not by patients, by insurance companies. But nevertheless, society recognizes that the doctor's loyalty, fiduciary loyalty, is not to the insurance company, but to the patient. So even that kind of argument, if you took that in another areas, it's not very convincing. That institutionalism argument that who pays that, those who pay the order the tune. No. Okay. It's but it's interesting. In case of teachers, it's fine. But in case of everybody else, like lawyers and doctors and financial experts, it's not fine, because it's not important who pays them. It's the relationship between them and their clients. That's what's important, and it has to be fiduciary.
Okay.
And I understand. I'm sorry, guys. I have to take my daughter. I'm sorry. So I apologize if I spoke too much, but I keep thinking about. It was very interesting, your article, and I know your ideas from other articles. So thank you, and see you in other symposium. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Eugene, I was just thinking, by the same token that you say that even though the insurance company or something else pays the lawyer and the doctor, and their fiduciary duty is towards their client, by the same token, can we also not argue that the fiduciary duty of a teacher is towards a student and not towards the institution, although institution pays them?
It should be like that. But I think today teachers are very deprofessionalized. They are hired to be just the button pusher for the institution.
Okay. Yeah, I can say that of doctors also, because doctors, when they come now, they are also not loyal to the patients. I mean, they are not loyal to the client. They are loyal to, they become very commercialized, because the hospitals and the organizations are so, commercial, that they expect the doctors to have certain number of patients, and they go through some tests. I've heard of this globally, not just in one context, that they go through procedures that are not required. And so there's a lot of these, and they give them a whole lot of tests that they don't need. And all of this is happening, and they're peddling it through the doctors. So how do you say? The same way that, there is an erosion of values and ethics at all levels. As it's happening, it's not only with teachers and the constraints of the institution and the pressures on them that makes them, compromise. It's also everywhere else that kind of compliance is there. I'm talking in practice.
Yeah, I'm talking about, Tara, the difference between medical profession and educational, that society as a whole recognizes that it's distortion and it's a problem. In case of educators, it's not recognized. That they think it's how it should be. Okay, and Dina, please.
I keep forgetting what I wanted to say, because
every
time it's a little thing here, little thing there, but I will try to sum up and then probably have to go. So first, I've been thinking that the only thing that a teacher of teachers can really do is just this return of agency, constant, like just you are being told to do something, or you're being asked, like, what do we do, what do we learn? You just ask, what is a good teacher? What do you want to learn? How do you think you will become one? What do you want to be doing? How do you see it happening? And so, like, I just think that's the only way you can kind of make people start creating their own images of the future and thinking, do I want to be doing this? Is this good? Okay, would I like that to be done to me? Or like, is that what I want to be doing? I don't think there is any other way. And in terms of the kind of state schools, also the only way that I have come across that helps students get agency again is this kind of separate tutorship or navigation system, where you get some sort of person who takes this fiduciary duty onto themselves, and then they are being asked personally by this student or that student or a group for a project, and they are helping that person or project be real, to happen, yeah, and to happen in the way that the students want. Like, so I don't think I've met that kind of thing as a teacher fiduciary.
This, in other words, amounts to teachers and professors becoming aware of their fiduciary duty and gaining the agency to ensure that the focus of their fiduciary duty is towards the student rather than the institution. That's what it boils down to, doesn't it?
And rather than themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's like,
exactly.
Rather than me thinking, what potential do I want to be realized in this class? I want one pianist and one cellist and one, scientist. But then
what the students want, in other words.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the point, I think, Eugene, that you also make towards the end, that it's what the students want that matters. That's where you differentiate between democratic and dialogical thing, where you say that it's more a democratic relationship because you follow the student, and then therefore you lose your authority in that sense.
Right. Although it could be complicated, and I gave one of the cases, remember, I think first case, when my students asked me to help them to learn about bullying and how to deal with the bullying in the classroom. And I quickly realized that, and I tried to do that, but I wanted to know what exactly you want to learn. And basically what they want to learn, if you kind of conceptualize, they want to know how to suppress the bully in their future classroom. And so they basically how to be a good oppressor for the bully. And I was thinking about, is it really they want it or maybe not really? So I decided to test this, whether or not they really want that or they don't. This is, it's too bad that Russ kind of, although he read that in paper and it didn't click for him, I think, probably. So there was an interesting case. So I gave them interesting survey, my students, on when they choose that topic. And the survey was about like, what they want to tell their future students. I don't want to bully my peers because, and then I developed 11 options. Some is because I will be punished if I do that, or I know that it's bad, or we're not like that, or I will be in troubles with my parents, for example, and so on and so forth. So some of them were based on the kind of morality, I would say, and some of based on this idea how to avoid punishment and rewards and so on and so forth. And it was rewards and punishment versus, and high majority choose actually morality. And they were, which surprised them as well, because initially they would say, we want to know how to suppress the bully and stop that at any means. And actually, when they have this survey, they realize that they actually might want something different.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
So in a way, this is, in my view, it's still fiduciary because it's true that, benefactor sometimes doesn't know exactly what they want, and fiduciary can help them to figure it out. So that's also possible. And in this case, when I was doing that, I was constantly thinking, am I enforcing my own values that like concern? But I kind of came to the conclusion that I was not forcing that on them, but rather it was still fiduciary because they never considered, as soon as they start considering that, it was very important for, I think, all of them probably, even those very small minority who choose this kind of behaviorist kind of things, it's still important for them. But by the way, usually if they choose that, they choose also moral as well. It's just they think that stopping bullying is more, in a way, their argument was at the end, many of them came to this very interesting argument that, stopping bullying is more important than education or even morality. It just has to be stopped. And for many interesting reasons, some of them disingenuous reasons, like they're afraid what the administration and parents will say about that, or law. And some of them were genuine. I cannot watch that kind of suffering, and I'm responsible. I have to do something. And yes, maybe it's not kosher, so-called, and I feel about that it's not completely kosher, but it's okay. It's more important to stop that. So it was very interesting and important thing. But I just want to say that it is not that clear that just follow the student path. It's much more complicated. And by the way, students want that because, of course, students feel that sometimes they don't know exactly where they want to go.
Yeah.
And it's part of that fiduciary to, by the way, it's based on the trust. But if I were not in that institution, it would be even better because some students will say, you know what, I don't like how Eugene teaching, goodbye, and just move away. And some would like to stay, and some come and go depending on the topic, and so on and so forth. This is, I think, much more genuine relationship between the teacher and the student. By the way, the same thing happened with the doctors. I'm in control to come to the doctor, not to come to the doctor, right? How often doctors say to come this, and I call them no, I change my mind. And that will be fine. And by the way, for some doctors, it's headache because they think I'm kind of messing up with the treatment, which can be in some cases true, and in some cases maybe not true.
Very interesting, yes. It's hard, I think, to look into what you're writing from the classical kind of progressivist paradigm, because it looks like for us probably like very radical. He was the one who always, when I was in Beersheba, said you and Eugene are very radical. And because it looks like radical, like breaking the even like the most widest freedom that he would
we
give
didn't get
as a positive
too much
freedom
in
for the
this
student.
fiduciary discussions.
And again, this
because I
idea of
think
giving freedom,
the
in my
biggest
view,
issue is, I think, in the field that the relationship with the teaching student should not be fiduciary, and that's
Yeah,
our
I thought it was fascinating that the discussion went to conditioning as the first, almost like when we went back to Skinner.
Right, but in the name of deconditioning, you will be very paternalistic.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you manipulate to demanipulate. It's exactly how you. And he says, "I see manipulation everywhere, so there is nothing wrong, but just a good manipulation."
Yeah, and it comes, I think, from a critical pedagogy,
which kind of creates interesting situation that separation people on the true people and manipulated people.
Right, exactly.
And the true people can paternalize non-manipulated people. And can do education on them.
Yeah, but
Freddie, by the way, Freddie part of that. It's the same kind of.
Yeah, it makes me really want to, the more I go to these meetings, the more I want to work at a free university, which doesn't exist.
That university of students.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we are now we are at the University of Students.
Well, interesting is that at that time there are two types of university existed, because right now I'm arguing there is a third type of university which is predominant. At that time there were two types of university, which is University of Students and University of Masters. This is how they called it, University of Masters. And now it's University of Credits. It's not University of Masters, not University of, because University of Masters is, you can understand, it's professor role. It's like whatever professor decides, it's a kind of the final word.
And that I would say that's the dream of Judy Green, because she always talks about how much they were, as professors or as teachers in the 60s, they had all this freedom to be progressive, to be creative, to bring the best, and now they don't. Teachers don't have freedom anymore.
Interesting. That's a good point.
Well, it was even in 60s, it was not that much freedom as in comparison in medieval time and late in medieval, because University of Masters almost existed until 19th century. And then they were killed by the credentialism and the University of Credits. Almost 20th century, I would say up to 20th century, University of Masters existed. But they were killed. It's like, at my University of Delaware, when I was arguing for initially University of Masters for authorial teaching, right? And at my department, I remember arguments coming from, Roberta, Frank Murray, and many others, like, well, if you teach developmental psychology, it should be the same. It doesn't matter who teaches that. You see, this is credits. Idea of credits coming from the credits, which will be codified by content. And I told them, give them example that, it will be bizarre if Piaget and Vygotsky will teach the same way with the same materials of the developmental psychology. And their reply to me was, but you are not Piaget or Vygotsky. And my reply to them, how do you know that? But that was such an interesting dialogue about this. The dialogue was between, by the way, huge distrust to the professors as authority, which means authors in the practice.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. I see that all the
And
time,
there is a voice
especially,
of institutional credentialism. Yeah.
especially in a university like the one I'm at, where we have a lot of adjuncts. There's a
Mhm.
huge distrust of the professor to
Mhm.
have a syllabus, to the point that they want me to create skeleton syllabi for different courses, and I'm just doing a very, very basic list of resources because I'm trying not to. I don't want to play too much into that game, so I'm doing the minimum that they're asking me to do.
Mhm.
And by the way, at the University of Delaware, they try to constantly standardize. In SCA, for example, they want to develop standards of in the syllabus standards what to teach. And in many ways, how? Yeah, and it's interesting, even in SCA, which is I thought that but of course they're coming from social justice, but with the same, it doesn't matter what's the justification of that. But it's distrust, it's not trust that the people are authors of their, neither teachers nor the, of course, not the students.
By the
Right.
way, I was really curious. This is a